Lieutenant Commander Jacoby and Ms. Martindale. Just repeat after me. I swear to tell the truth and nothing but the truth, so help me God. Thank you. Lieutenant Commander Jacoby.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and distinguished members of the committee. It's a pleasure to appear before you tonight to discuss the compliance with requirements of the Deepwater contract. I am Lieutenant Commander Chad Jacoby. I served as the program manager for the 123-foot patrol boat conversion project from July 2004 to October 2006. As the 123 program manager, I managed the delivery task orders under the Deepwater contract that pertain to the production, delivery, and warranty support of the 123-foot cutters. During my time as program manager, I supervised the delivery of Coast Guard Cutter Attu, Coast Guard Cutter Nunivak, Coast Guard Cutter Vashon, Coast Guard Cutter Monhegan, and Coast Guard Cutter Manitou. I managed contracts with engineering firms to diagnose structural issues. I administered the one-year warranty period on all 8 delivered 123s, and I managed the contract modifications to install structural upgrades on the cutters. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before you tonight, and I will be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Martindale.
There's a couple storylines that can come out of this investigation and this hearing, and one relative to the low smoke cable is that because that requirement was waived, that guardsmen are put at risk if there should be a fire aboard that vessel. So I guess I'd appreciate your observations as to why you agreed to that waiver, if that were an accurate assessment.
Yes, sir. To be accurate, the requirement was not waived. The request for deviation was approved for specific cables, and those specific cables, as was addressed before, were either on the mast, which the rationale that was provided from the IPT and from the C4 community was that a cable on the mast that produces smoke does not put anyone at risk. Also, some of the cables on the waiver request were, some examples would be phone cords or keyboard cords, not cables that were installed by Lockheed Martin, but cables that came on COTS equipment, and the determination from the IPT and from the C4 community was that you would not want to cut the phone cords off the COTS equipment and have Lockheed try to put low smoke cables in their place, sir. Those were the rationales that I received before signing the waiver.
Okay, and
I realize the Coast Guard throws, as all the services do, a heck of a lot of responsibility on very young officers. But it strikes me as something, a program that $90 million expenditure, 8 ruined cutters. Did you at any time or sense that you just weren't high enough of a pay rate to address these problems?
Sir, I think I mirror Ms. Martindale's feelings of the program early on. The staffing levels were very bleak. When I reported aboard, my billet was actually to be the Deputy Surface Program Manager with an overarching view of all the cutters construction. And shortly after arriving, I saw the 123 program with a need for some change and some guidance. I took that over in addition to the Deputy Surface job. After some months of work on the 123, it was clear that that was a full-time job plus. So in that time frame of 2004, people were wearing 2 and 3 hats and moving the program forward. The Commandant yesterday talked about increasing manning levels and oversight, and I can attest, I witnessed over my 2.5 years on the program the increase of staffing levels. And after a while, the people were wearing 3 hats got replacements and were working. Before I left in October of 2006, we were properly manning each billet instead of asking people to cover 2 and 3 billets, sir.
And again, I would invite you to correct me, but that one jumps out at me is so glaring that I find it inconceivable. Now, let's take it to something a little bit more complicated, the hogging and sagging calculations.
Yes, sir.
Is that your normal expertise within the Coast Guard? If a crew boat company or a ferry boat operator were going to lengthen their vessel, is that the sort of calculation that you would run?
I am not a naval architect or a marine safety inspector, sir, but I am a shipboard engineer for the Coast Guard.
Okay.
An engineer on 2 through 78-foot ships, and even engineer supporting the patrol boats down in Key West prior to my deepwater career. I, from a common sense standpoint, I think share your concern that that doesn't pass the common sense test, but I'm not a naval architect to back that up with calculations, sir.
Well, Commander, let me ask you this, and I very much appreciate your frankness. What's being done so it doesn't happen again? I told you my concerns with the LCS. I told you my concerns with the next generation of cutters. You know, shame on me if a mistake is made once, but shame on all of us. Enlisted officer ranks, members of the Congress, members of the administration, if we let this happen again. And I really, based on what I've heard tonight, don't have any confidence that we're doing this any better. And what is particularly troubling, and I'll tell you, I sense this is the shipboard equivalent of sweeping it under the rug. When you cut this ship up for scrap and it's no longer there to be on 60 Minutes, or if it's sunk offshore for a fishing reef, it's no longer there to be on 60 Minutes, we've got a real problem here.
Yes, sir.
And I would like to hear from you as our up-and-coming officer in the United States Coast Guard that you've got a high degree of confidence that this is being addressed rather than just, let's hope nobody asks that question again.
Yes, sir. I firmly believe that the factors that led to the structural issue, as well as the C4 issues we've talked about tonight, I could see the evolution of the things that will keep those from happening again in my 2.5 years in the Coast Guard. One of them was the manning level that we talked about, the wearing 3 hats, and I think there's been comparisons between deepwater manning and Navy shipbuilding manning, and we were trying to build ships with very few people. Another major contributor is the specificity of the requirement in the contract. In all these situations, we were dealing with contract language that was signed in 2002 and left the contractor and the government, in many cases, unclear on the exact requirements. It was a performance-based contract, but it still could have specificity that both the government and industry could use to manage costs, manage expectations, manage requirements. Additionally, the oversight and the input from regulatory agencies, the Commandant and the PEO have mandated the use of regulatory agencies in further designs, and I've personally been involved in incorporating the things that brought us problems on this contract, like specific words in the contract or lack of words in the contract, into future contracts for the FRC and the OPC. So I do have a sense that I've contributed by the painful lessons learned to better contracts and better oversight and better manning for the deepwater program, sir.
If a contract passed your desk tomorrow that called for a radio or radar, fill in the blank, Loran, that's going to be exposed to the weather and did not mandate that it be waterproof. And you know, we all know the difference between weatherproof and waterproof. And would you be empowered to say, we're going to fix this right now rather than buy 2 or 3 or 4 of these at government expense and replace the ones that don't work.
Absolutely, sir. And I do have examples of issues that arose on the Deepwater program that the program office felt did not meet the contract requirements, and were able to enforce those requirements and get design changes and even retrofits on the cutters. So there are examples of successes in enforcing the contract requirements, and then there's examples of the program office unsuccessfully enforcing, mostly because of the wording that was incorporated into the contract in 2002, either vague or lacking the specificity.